It's a real pleasure for me to be here. I always enjoy speaking to women. I think it is tremendously important that we do get together, that we share experiences and stories and networking. Because although we've seen success in terms of women's rise within organizations, including universities, I think there are still a ways to go. There are lessons learned and things that we really have to share with one another to make sure that we feel individually and collectively supported. So I think having these types of venues is tremendously important. I'm here as president of the University of Calgary, which obviously is a leadership role, but if I go back in my career, I really didn't think about leadership, I didn't talk about leadership, and probably didn't see myself as a leader. Really, it's something that maybe organically happened over time, and perhaps that's typical for many women, is we don't visualize, and whether that's due to lack of role models or lack of confidence, we don't necessarily see ourselves in these roles, but over time, I think we can take them on and do a great job. And particularly, I'm pleased to see the number of women rising as university presidents in this country, and especially women engineers. I'm not sure about that. Both major universities in Alberta have female engineers as presidents, U of Calgary and Alberta, and the incoming president of the University of Saskatchewan is a female engineer. So I think that says something, but I'm going to come back to that later because it's not just about getting the job, it's keeping the job, and we've seen some trends there as well. So I started my career as an engineering student thinking that I was going to go work in industry, and which I did after my undergraduate degree. And my definition of success was really thinking about sort of moving up through a corporate environment. Hadn't thought about a university at all. I did go back to do my master's and PhD in a technology area, GPS, which is my discipline, but always with the thought that I would go back into industry, and that would be sort of my path to throughout my career and to some level of success. And it was really due to NSERC, the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada, which is a federal funding agency, that back in the early 90s created a program to recruit more women into science and engineering faculty positions, of which I was nominated and very fortunate to get one of those, that created my own position within my department. And I did say, well, I'll try this academic thing, we'll see how it works, and I can always do something different if I don't like it. So it was interesting. I think at that time, 1991, universities, they were not hiring, period, and women in engineering, it was on the radar because of the Montreal Massacre, but the numbers were so small and people were really struggling with how do we deal with this issue. So I had a golden opportunity to be able to start a career and be in a great environment. Now, when I joined our Faculty of Engineering, there were 86 faculty members and there was one other female faculty member. And she just retired about a year ago, significantly older than me, but I have to give her a lot of credit. So when I came in, I was sort of the new generation, and the Dean of Engineering at the time didn't say we went from one female faculty member to two. He would say we just doubled the number of female faculty members. So I was on my journey and hadn't thought too much at that time about being a woman in a minority position relative to my engineering colleagues, because I grew up, as many of my female engineering students at the time also felt, they were brought up in families that may have had mom or dad or both with science backgrounds. They were highly encouraged, and you really just didn't think twice about the environment that you were in. But once I got into a faculty position, and coinciding of having our first child, young woman, a girl, The light started to come on, and I said, now it's time to give something back, because not everybody was blessed with the same career path that I had. So I got involved at that point in women in science and engineering issues. I felt it was important, and although one doesn't seek to become a role model, sometimes that position is put upon you, and you do have to, I think, wear it responsibly and to be able to contribute back to those who come after you. And it was mentioned, I did that sort of off the side of my desk. But then in 1997, I was very fortunate to take on, I would say, my first leadership role, and that was as a chair for women in science and engineering. And that's where I could spend half of my time on issues surrounding women in science and engineering. And that was fun, because it was an opportunity where there was a blank slate. The issue was huge, challenge immense, but here's something I could really sink my teeth into. So this is where I focused on that as a leadership opportunity. I networked, I developed strategic plans, I had advisory council. I kind of modeled all the things that I thought were important to try to make a difference. And one of the things I really focused on, and I think as women leaders we have to be thinking carefully about, is managing expectations. I think a lot of times we set very high bars for ourselves, and which is good. We want to be able to meet those bars, but part of it is managing our own expectations and not burning ourselves out. So having a clear strategy, making sure I was communicating, was letting the community be clear on what I was going to do and not do, but it was also an ability for me to make sure I was being clear with myself of what I could do, and I wasn't trying to take on the world, so to speak. Great opportunity, met lots of people, and I think that was an experience that sort of said to me, I can be a leader, I can do this too. People may listen to me. If I've got something to say, people may listen. My next major leadership opportunity was as a dean of engineering, and that was fabulous, because it really, as a dean, you're a CEO of a faculty. You're doing the strategic planning, you're doing the budgeting, you're doing the fundraising, you're doing all of the things that are almost like running a company. That was a real learning experience for me, because I took what I had done as a chair for women in science and engineering, which sounds like a very different role, but mapped it over to being dean. And it was really around strategic planning. We launched a whole new strategic plan of trying to reframe how engineering was seen, talking a lot about, in our case as an engineering school, what leadership was all about, because we're in a city of leaders in Calgary. We felt we needed to graduate engineering students who saw themselves as leaders. We thought that was not only important to our jurisdiction, but also in a very subtle way reached out to women students, because it wasn't just about the academic rigor of engineering, which we know is important, but it was starting to really talk openly about valuing the skill sets around the engineering discipline that really defines success down the road. And we knew that was important for women. We had, when I was chair, we had done a study with our colleagues in sociology. We surveyed over 1,000 of our engineering students, and we asked them, what defines a successful engineer? Well, the female students talked about teamwork and communication skills. The male students talked about mechanical ability. So, not that they didn't value the other, but in terms of where the polls were, you could see the women students, they do reach out to areas where there is going to be an impact on the world, and some of the softer or other types of professional skills that would allow them to do that. Whereas men often had a mental framework around that technical ability, valuing the technology, spending time in the computer. That's what's going to get you to move up. Well, we know which one is right. It's really all the other skill sets that make the difference. So, Dean of Engineering, great experience, and then, of course, now president of the university, which is fascinating. I think these leadership roles are daunting. There are days you're wondering what the heck you're doing, but I think if you talk to your colleagues across the country, and when I do, it's a true privilege. These are wonderful institutions. There's a lot to be done. They're challenging times. We talked this morning earlier about what's happening in Quebec and how that's changing the dynamics of student empowerment. I'm sure we'll see some repercussions of that throughout the country. So you're never at a standstill. It's never dull, and I think you can make a difference. When I was named as the president of the University of Calgary, they didn't talk about being the first engineer being president. They talked about being the first female president of the University of Calgary. And in fact, about 6 months in to my tenure, I said, I do not want to hear another introduction of me being called the first female president of the university. And not that I was ashamed of it in any way, shape, or form, but I think it was pretty darn obvious of my gender. And I think, let's just not beat that one to death. We've said it a few times. People know, let's move on. So I think we've eradicated that from most of the introductions. But also, people say, well, what's the difference? You went from being a dean to a president. How is it different? I said, really, it's a scale up. All the things I did as dean, I'm doing now as president on a bigger stage. You're doing the fundraising, you're doing the strategic planning, you're worrying about budgets, your external relations, you're doing all of that. The difference is, if I screw up, I'm on the front page of the paper. I'm not got a few faculty members emailing me saying, we didn't like what you said last week at Faculty Council. So challenging, exciting, and I think women can bring a lot to leadership positions within a university. Why do we want more women in leadership? Part of it is just basic diversity. We want diversity around the table. We want different experiences, different behaviors in some cases. I remember when I was talking to one of my vice presidents who was a male, just when I was about to start, he said, I really hope that when you, start as president and we meet as an executive team that you can stop the swearing. I'm like, really? That's an issue? And I guess it was, which we don't see anymore. But, some of that is just so basic that I think having diversity at the table maybe keeps everybody in line. But also, it is important, and this is hard to quantify. I think if you look at some of the research that's been done in the private sector, and Catalyst is an organization that's done a lot of work, they've actually done research where they've quantified that having women in senior leadership positions in organizations has a direct impact on the bottom line, that they can actually match when you've got 30% women in executive positions. It actually makes a difference to the return to the company and hence the shareholders. That's very, very powerful. I don't think we have quite the equivalent research in the academic environment and what is our bottom line. That could be very hard to define, but it is important. What I have certainly seen as a trend is that it is no longer seen as acceptable to not have women in senior leadership positions in a university. There was a time where you would have people say, the pool is too small, we tried, there's nobody there. Quite frankly, that doesn't cut it anymore. And when I talk to some of my male colleagues, in fact, I talked to one last week, he had just done a search at a vice presidential level, and he was absolutely lamenting that the final candidate happened to be a male. There was a female in the final pool. And he was just dreading, he goes, when this news goes out to my university, I will be in big trouble because it will just not, everybody else is male, it's just not going to be, they'll say I didn't try hard enough. And he really took it upon himself to feel very responsible for that. I think that's healthy. I think there are women out there who do wonderful jobs and can add to our organizations. In our particular case, I'm very pleased that not only do we get Diane Kenyon to our executive leadership team, our provost is also female. And I don't think at a research university in the U15 in Canada, both the president and the provost are both female. So I think it can be done. And in fact, our executive leadership team, 50% male, 50% female, which I think is extremely powerful. The question is, what makes great leaders? Interesting book by Ross Paul, who is the former president of the University of Windsor, called Leadership Under Fire, and he talked about presidencies at Canadian universities and some of the research that had been done by third parties, by Fullen and Scott, looking at characteristics of top leaders in academic environments, and found that 7 of the 10 characteristics revolved around emotional intelligence. It is that ability to be able to perceive, assess, and manage the emotions of oneself and of others. And we know that that is critical. There's a lot of emerging literature on this, and it's something I think we don't pay enough attention to individually and collectively. One of the things that we have done as an executive leadership team is we brought in an external facilitator, actually from Toronto, that worked, because we finally had our executive team formed last August, working with us as a team. And we did a management assessment of each one of us individually. We came together and saw everybody's profiles and focused a lot on the emotional intelligence piece. How do people react to situations? How do they manage their emotions? How do they deal with stress? How do they deal with conflict? Those are big issues in leadership positions, and particularly within a leadership team. And so those are things I think that as women we need to think about. Often we look at, again, our academic credentials, we look at our hard skills, but we need to spend as much time on some of these softer skills that really allow you to perform at a high level in your role. If I look at what I do, most of it is around relationships. I know where I want to go, but how am I going to get there? How am I going to navigate the terrain, so to speak? When I came in and started discussing with our executive team, new president, new strategic direction. It always works that way. One of my VPs said, just tell us where you want to go and we'll go there. I said, it doesn't work that way. I can't come in and say, here is the vision for the University of Calgary. Nobody's going to listen. We have to have a collective. People need to own it. They need to feel that they were part of the process, and then we're all coming out aligned at the end of the day. And that's what we did, and that's what many universities do. It is about navigating the terrain, the politics, the personalities, other people's anxieties, but with a clear sense of what you're trying to achieve at the end of the day. So the question is then, how do we get more women into leadership positions within universities? Part of it is just process-wise, and I'm sure you're probably very well developed on things like having women on search committees and just ensuring that you do reporting back on how many female candidates there are in pools for when you do searches for all levels within the organization. This is important because it just keeps that front and center that this is something that we need to be considering. Mentoring clearly is something that we need to think about. I'm of mixed emotion whether formal mentoring programs are the best way or more informal. Myself, I've not ever been part of a formal. As a mentee, I've mentored lots of people, and I think it's a little bit open as to what really is the best approach, and some of that is very individual in terms of what one needs. There are other approaches that I think we need to be looking at. On the academic side, there are a few interesting programs that are coming out of the United States at Drexel University. One of them is in the engineering area. It's called Executive Leadership in Academic Technology and Engineering, ELATE. And this is a program funded in large part by industry, where they identify women academics in engineering, computer science, and other related disciplines that have the potential to become department chairs or deans or beyond. And they have very rigorous programming for them. Part of it is they meet for 3 or 4 day periods as a group. Part of it is mentoring with a senior woman in the discipline. Part of it is the candidates actually interviewing senior leaders, again, within their organization and beyond. And it's very exciting because it is exactly designed to give women the skills, knowledge, and confidence to move up into academic leadership roles within their organization or elsewhere. This program is modeled on another program they have in medicine, which is deemed to be extremely successful. And I'll just read a quote. Nearly 700 senior women have completed the medicine program since 1995, and the alumni of the medical program make up 25% of the executive positions in academic medicine and dentistry that are held by women. So that's huge. I think the engineering equivalent will be successful. It's the first cohort going through this year, and I'll be teaching as part of that program in December down at Drexel. excel. So that's important because it's very specific, identifying high potential leaders and actually moving them through the system. The other thing that we are starting at our university, and I think universities in general don't do a great job of, Ryerson, you may be an exception, is succession planning. And I know it is tough on the academic side because of how searches are done, but it is something we need to be thinking about. We are just starting at the executive level a process around succession planning for our own roles and then rolling it out through the organization. And this isn't just sitting there, well, you know, if I got hit by a bus, Joe could do my job. This is about a process of really defining what are the competencies needed in my job, who are the people that may be able to be mapped into my role, where are they deficient on that matrix, and what do we need to do specifically to help fill those gaps, not to guarantee them the job, but to help position them in a very clear way to be able to move up through the organization. So we are just starting that. I think for women it's very powerful that they can be identified and again moved up into developing their skill sets. And it's healthy whether or not they become leaders at our institution. I think it's healthy for the system as a whole. I talked about the need of getting more women into leadership positions, and the alternative to that, of course, is once we get them there, can we keep them there? And I did want to touch very quickly on what one of my male colleagues, Peter McKinnon at the University of Saskatchewan, talks about, which is the precarious presidency. You have probably seen nationally that over the last 5 or 6 years, we have noticed a trend at the presidential level of universities where presidencies are terminated quite quickly, sometimes 18 months, 2 years, 2.5 years into a president's role. If you go back 15 years or more, that was extremely rare, almost unprecedented. People, they tended to wait out somebody's term and then make a change. But you're seeing some moves at various institutions across the country, big and small, where they've actually moved presidents out fairly early on in their time. Overlaying that is if you look at the distribution of who is being moved out, women are extremely overrepresented. So relative to their numbers, they are hitting the wall, so to speak, at much higher percentages than our male colleagues. And this is disturbing in the sense that we know universities invest very heavily in recruiting presidents. It's a year-long process minimum, lots of stakeholder engagement, rigorous interviewing, rigorous reference checking in theory. And everybody, I think, is motivated to have the new president be set up for success. But again, we're seeing some of those change really on a dime. So what is the issue and why are women being more affected by this than men? I don't have all the answers. In fact, David Turpin, the president of the University of Victoria, is studying this. He's getting some data and looking at some of the trends. But I can say it does send shockwaves through the community, and particularly for women leaders. If I was to speculate when presidents get together and sort of say why, and every case is different, let's face it, I think part of it is when women perhaps come into some of these leadership roles, they don't necessarily have the same level of political savvy. And, it's really important, going back again to what I talked about earlier, of not only having your academic rigor, kind of checking the boxes and all the things you've done. Do you have the political overlay to manage the various stakeholders and relationships and really have that, I call it a sixth sense of really reading the body language and verbiage or non-verbiage of other people. And I think sometimes I have seen women that, okay, I got the job, they thought I was the right person, I'm just going to barrel ahead. You've got to take care of all of the relationships around you, and particularly those of the Board of Governors of your university, because that's who you report to at the end of the day. I think also in parallel, we have seen boards of governors themselves held to a higher standard of governance And they are, I think, holding the presidents again accountable to a higher level. And the job has just evolved. I mean, the expectations of these jobs are huge, and they're expanding. So getting tougher to find people and getting tougher to keep people in the roles. So just in summary, a few thoughts that I have just about my own leadership experience. Part of it is that I spend a lot of my time on the relationship side, not just externally with donors, community leaders, and government, but also with my own people. I put a lot of time into team building at the executive level and what we call our senior leadership team level, which are associate VPs, deans, and others. A lot of time on even performance management, and this is not sort of punitive performance management, it's just having a really clear sense of what we need to achieve. Many of you know Diane Kenyon, and she's representative of a high sense of urgency. Let's make sure that we all know what we want to achieve this year, and we're not going to solve all the world's problems in the next 6 to 12 months. So part of it is not necessarily pushing people, it's actually reining them in and saying, let's manage, and we're in a marathon and not a sprint. So people and team development. Making sure I always approach problems with the best interests of the institution at heart. Now that sounds very trivial, but I can tell you I have seen leaders who focus on what's best for them and not what's best for the organization. And sometimes that can drive very different decisions. I think women in general do a very good job of thinking about the best interests of the organization, even if it's not best for me or for them. Also, I think married to that is being comfortable with conflict. It doesn't mean you're out looking for fights, but there's conflict, there's tension, there's friction, maybe within your team, within others, and it's having the ability to put the issues on the table, discuss them, find a solution, and move on. I think women generally are pretty good at this. I have seen, again, I'm generalizing, sometimes men have a harder time with managing conflict than women. I think we're just put it out there, solve it, move on. One of the things I also focus on is making sure I'm continually clear on my principles and values. When you're in a leadership role, the buck stops with you. Particularly as president, you set the tone for the organization. You really help drive the culture of the organization. And what I find is acceptable or unacceptable really puts that line in the sand for the whole organization. I can't hold others accountable to a certain level of principle or values that I'm not holding and demonstrating myself. I put a lot of time and thought into that. Part of it is being clear that you can delegate. I have seen women leaders, men too, but women, I would say more so, that have a hard time of delegating to their team. It's, we do like to multitask. We do want to hold ourselves to a high standard. Sometimes that can reflect back on you trying to do everybody else's job rather than pushing things down and holding them accountable. Making sure that you have a thick skin. These jobs, whatever level, people are going to criticize. You're not in them to make friends. You don't want enemies, but you're not in them to make friends. You've got to be comfortable with criticism and not take it personally. And that can be hard sometimes, because I think as women we tend to sort of mull through situations, and maybe our first instance is to think about ourselves. And finally, I think one of the things that I've seen over my career is that as women leaders, we're increasing in numbers, but we're still seen as a bit of a curiosity. I know, when I was being thought of as president, there's still, she was a dean, she was tough. It's just a label that I think if you checked with the people who work with me, no, I'm not tough. I set a high standard. I will not ask anybody to do anything I'm not willing to do. I drive accountabilities, but I'm very fair and very reasonable. But that can be misinterpreted because people do want to label you. Also, just in terms of your own behaviors, I talked about the swearing at the executive table. That was seen as that wouldn't be acceptable if I was president, nor should it be. That's not the tone you want to set. So the acceptable behaviors of women leaders are much more narrow than they are for men. That's a fact of life. 20 years, it may be different. Maybe they'll converge more to our behaviors, I don't know. But it's just the way it is, and one has to be extremely careful about that because you don't want to compromise your credibility within the organization. As women leaders, I think we have a lot to bring, but what we don't want to do at the end of the day is compromise who we are and what we stand for as women. So with that, I'm going to stop and just say thank you very much for having me. I'd be happy to answer any questions about what I'm doing or our university or women in leadership, and thank you very much.